Welcome to Orange Cups podcast, where each episode is full of inspiration. Today, I have the pleasure of interviewing Adrian Alvarado, a actor known for Law and Order Special Victims Unit for Life and The Punisher. He's just created a book called Flipping My Script, where we get a scoop of his personal life. Welcome to the podcast.
Thank you for having me. Appreciate it.
Not a problem. Before we get into your book, Flipping My Script, you've been involved in numerous shows. How has being on so many different sets and working with different teams influenced your perspective on acting?
Well, I mean, every it's a good question because every job's different.
Yeah.
Right. And I fall back on my training. That's what we go to school for.
Mm-hmm.
I had some great instructors, and they would prepare you for scenarios like that. One of my teachers, specifically the great Joe Police, he would teach us to, first of all, when you walk into a set, to be prepared, right? Especially working with directors, because sometimes you're going to work with a director who's just focused on the big picture, not focusing on, he thinks you're going to come here and be prepared. So don't assume that the director's going to give you what you need. You know what I mean? So almost like you're independent to a degree. But sometimes you work with great directors. But that training helps to control the perspective, and make sure that I'm focused on my job, But there have been so many great jobs. Like I got to work with Cheech Marin.
Okay.
On Mind Demencia, and I mean that changed my perspective because he was awesome. It was a humbling experience where it was lunchtime and he was coming in the afternoon, and then he came in with his plate on the lunch table, and he's like, "Hey, Adrian, do you mind if I sit with you?" And I go, "First of all, how do you know my name? I'm just this young cat that I'm just here. There's no way you know my name. You're Cheech, right?" But what it taught me was that he looked at the sheet and saw who he was working with, figured out who was who, and called us by our name.
Wow. So he took time to get to know who he was working with.
Yeah.
Pretty much appreciate it. I'm sure not a lot of
Yeah.
directors or
No,
do that.
especially an actor on his level. I mean,
Yeah, and actors.
took out the time to know who everybody was. And we all knew who he was, right?
Right.
So, I mean, that changed my perspective, to be professional. And, hey, we're all the same on the set.
Exactly. I love that. Do you have a favorite role or show that stands out from your acting career? What made it special?
Well, my special role was my big break was on General Hospital.
Wow.
I played Detective Cruz Rodriguez on there, and that opened up my world. It established me as a working actor, and that was great. But there's been so many every job's special for me. But that was the one that got me started and made me legit. Made me official, and it was a great experience.
Can you share any memorable experiences from behind the scenes of one of the shows you've been a part of?
Yeah, one working with Cheech,
Okay.
just that moment. But there was working on Marvel's The Punisher, working with John Bernthal, was a whole other experience for me. Like, cause he's one of the top actors right now, and at the time he was zooming off of Walking Dead, and it was intimidating, to work with. I wasn't intimidated, but it was like, oh my God, because it was a fight scene, and I had to fight him and do my own stuff. So it was a challenge, and then getting through that and seeing how cool he was and how professional he was. I mean, I felt like it graduated me to another level where I felt like, all right, I belong here.
It must have been amazing working with Marvel itself. Like,
Oh man, it was. I mean, yeah, it was. It's fantastic. I mean, I love to work as an actor. Being on the set is my happy place. So whatever set it is, I'm happy.
how do you decide which roles to take? Are there certain factors like the script, director, or co-stars that heavily influence your decision?
Yeah. Well, fortunately, I do get to choose which roles I not to audition or accept. I do get offered roles. I don't get offered many. I don't have that luxury where I can say, oh, I can do this job and that job. But I go with what feels right, in my heart. If there's a role that there's some stuff that comes through that, isn't well defined, and if it doesn't fit at this point in my career, at my age, then it's like, I'm not right for it, and we just pass. Not necessarily because of a director or anything, but just because of it has to feel right.
It has to be for you.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I
Absolutely.
agree. You shouldn't take a role that's not for you. That
Yeah,
you're gonna
yeah.
be uncomfortable the whole time. Like, I knew this wasn't for me. I'm stuck in this situation now. I have to complete the job.
Yeah.
So that's amazing to hear.
Yeah.
Is there a dream role or a type of character you haven't played yet and would love to in the future?
Yes. I have a few. I mean, look, you know, I'm a lot. I started as a Hispanic actor,
Okay.
but then we became Latino. Now we're Latinx. You know, our somebody keeps changing our narrative, which is kind of what the book's all about. But look, I'm a Latin actor, so we are written. You know, Hollywood has a way of, you know, writing stereotypes, and it's full of stereotypes. But my goal has always been, hey, I could be James Bond.
That's right.
Why not?
Why not?
You know, some sort of, you know, special agent where I can infiltrate anything. You know, I am racially ambiguous.
I could kind of see
Right?
that. Yes.
You can put me in the hood. You can put me in the palace. You know, and bilingual too. I don't think James Bond's bilingual, so
Very diverse.
you know what I'm saying? Hey, make me Batman. That's how I think. You know, but those are the challenges that we face. You know, as actors of color. You know.
What inspired the title Flipping My Script?
Yeah, it's intertwined. You know, my acting career and my writing. I think they both started around the same time, the journey. I think the writing was more for me as something that I've been developing and sort of harnessing throughout. But flipping my script, I think they go hand in hand because I consider myself a storyteller. But flipping my script comes from, you know, it's a layered title. It comes from one of my favorite, not one of my favorite movies, but it was one of my favorite actors in the '90s was Wesley Snipes.
Okay.
He did a movie called Sugar Hill, and you know it's about these two brothers in Harlem who are, you know, navigating the underworld against certain nefarious groups, right? And they get to a situation where they're getting infiltrated and they're getting double crossed. And Wesley Snipes says to his brother, "It's time for me to flip the script," right? And it always stuck to me. Right? Because he's like,
That's right.
everybody was attacking their narrative and telling them who they should be. And I just always like, because that's what I was doing at the time, you know, flipping my script. And it just always stuck to me. And when I finally finished the book, it wasn't until like the end, I wasn't going to name it that. And then it was like, it came back, it was like I was literally staying up all night and like, oh my God, because this was like decision time. I had all these titles, and I'm like, flipping my script, because this is what we did.
Wow.
And I kept thinking about the story. I kept thinking about the challenges that young me was facing, and how I kept flipping them and kept changing the narrative. And then it just felt right, and I'm like, yep, that's the title.
It's amazing, and it goes so well with the book. It really does, and with your life, you know, like it seems like every chapter you were flipping your script. So I'm glad that you had like an epiphany in the middle of the night, like this is it.
This is
this
it.
is from that movie, and I know, and you can relate to it. So
Yeah.
before we deep dive into this book, I wanted to let you know that flipping my script hit home in so many ways. As I was reading chapter after chapter, it was like you put me into your shoes. I had a motion picture in my head, and as I was reading it, and I felt every emotion you described that you were telling your story. This book is truly an amazing book.
I mean, I'm so humbled by that. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
That's awesome. I mean, it touches my heart. Thank you.
We're gonna start off with the very beginning, with your grandmother Estelle, who was a Afro-Latina. She cleaned houses back in the 1940s on the beautiful island of Puerto Rico. You speak on how it was hard for anyone who had darker skin color, or as you say, looks more African Taino heritage. Back on the island, can you say racism existed within our own culture?
Oh, absolutely. Colorism, right? Because it's not racism, because we're all, you know, Latin, right? So we're all the same race. But yeah, colorism absolutely exists, even till this day. And I mean, we're a part of America, right? And we can't deny the history of American history, and you know the civil rights movement, the racist history of America, and we're a reflection of that. You know, the history of Spain and the Spaniards. I mean, they're very there's a lot of colorism there. I mean, so yeah, you go to the island, and then my dad'll point that out. He's like, oh, you go to the banks, tú vas pa'l banco aquí, tú vas para allá, tú ves toda esta gente. You know, very light-skinned Puerto Ricans, light eyes, dyed blonde hair, and they all have the nice hotels, nice banking jobs, and everywhere still today on the island.
Wow. So you said it was harder for her to get a better job just because she was darker complex.
Well, yeah. Well, you were limited.
Yeah,
You
very
know,
limited.
you were very limited. I mean, it goes back to Pedro Albizu Campos, right? His mom was mulata. That's the word that we used on the island at the time. But Afro Latina, and his father was a Spanish merchant, and his father didn't claim him until he was an Ivy League student. You know what I mean? And
Yeah.
this guy was one of our father of our independence. So he experienced this. My grandmother definitely experienced this. And those were one of the only jobs they had at the time. There weren't a lot of schools in the mountains. Everything was very rural. She literally lived on the side of a mountain, on the hill, literally, like the balcony is like over the cliff.
Wow.
So, yeah, it still exists.
Your grandmother Estelle was pregnant by the age of 15.
Mm.
Back in those days, it seemed like to be a mom at a young age was the normal.
Mm-hmm.
Seeing males have multiple families throughout the island was normal. How do you feel about this affecting women back in the 40s?
Empathy is tricky because you want to try and put yourself in other people's shoes, but just based on my mother and my grandparents, it's something that they live with. In particular, because I speak about both my grandmothers, but my grandmother Estelle was pretty quiet. My grandma Coca was the opposite, and she didn't deal with machistas and male chauvinism. She was, if you tried something, she tried it back, and she made you pay for it. So, some women were okay with it. I saw that there were two. So my grandmother on my father's side, my paternal grandmother, she was quick to give you a right hook if you disrespected her, no matter who you were. And that's what happened with my grandfather. He tried to, be a domestic violence, and then she didn't have it and almost knocked him out.
She put her foot down.
Mm-hmm.
At this point, there's a transition where your grandparents move from
Mm-hmm.
Puerto Rico to Jersey City.
Mm-hmm.
Fast forward, after your mom finishes high school, she goes on to meet your biological father, Felix Alvarado. I love how your parents' first date was eating Chinese food. It's a classic. Your father was a gambler,
Mm-hmm.
and eventually that led him to purchasing property in his hometown, Salinas, Puerto Rico. He built two little houses,
Mm-hmm.
a hair salon for your mother and your traditional little Puerto Rican home. Your mom got pregnant with her firstborn, Richard, which delayed the process of moving back to Puerto Rico.
Mm-hmm.
He was born with complications, and your parents decided to admit him full-time to a medical center, which, as you described, broke your mother's heart.
Mm-hmm.
Can you tell me what your parents must have felt at that moment? How your mother must have been fighting her own decision about Richard?
Well, Richard, I have my older brother's Eddie. Richard was the second, and I'm the third
okay.
boy. I mean, she was devastated. My dad was devastated. It was devastating. And at the time, I mentioned that it was, there might have been an X-ray because there was a lot of experimentation in Puerto Rico on us Puerto Ricans. They were checking every box for us. So like, yeah, give her an X-ray, see what happens. But from what I heard from my grandma, my dad, took that very hard. He took it really personal. He felt like he couldn't be around him. So it was two different experiences. Well, my dad just sort of, it wasn't necessarily a rejection. It was just almost like he couldn't take it.
He couldn't bear it.
He couldn't bear it.
It broke his heart.
Yeah. And my mom, I mean, we used to visit Richard all the time. At the Woodbridge as a kid, I remember him pinching me. If I got too close, he would pinch. But yeah, I mean, it devastated her. I'm sure she wanted to raise him. She was raising him. I have pictures of her with him in the house and everything. But it became too difficult to care for him, and unfortunately, we had to admit him. And I mean, as a parent now, I can only imagine not being able to care for my son or daughter. So yeah, it was tough for her.
I'm sure.
Yeah.
It was at that moment, it was very heartbreaking for me to read because, as I get older and become a parent in the future, you try your best to do everything. And I'm sure they were at the point where they've tried everything. So it was pretty tough. But I'm pretty sure she made the right decision for that 24-hour care, and it relieved her and both of them in a way where she can pay attention a little more to you guys
Yeah.
and, take care of her other two children. Can you describe the type of man Felix was at this point? Who was Jersey City Felix?
Well, in the beginning of the book, it's stories I've heard of my dad, right? Because I'm a
Mhm.
young boy. But Jersey City Felix hasn't changed much. My dad's still around. He's gonna be 79 years old, and I think he literally just retired, running numbers
Oh,
8 months ago. So he has been a hustler his whole life,
Yeah.
you know. And one of the I mentioned that my dad, he's a roller coaster, but he never pretended to be anything he wasn't. Like he was who he was. Like he knew who he was. He was this uneducated hustler, who had this little swag, and that's who he still is. You know what I mean? Till this day.
I love it. He
So
hasn't changed.
he hasn't changed. He's just older now and doesn't go to the old San Juan bar like he used to, and run the crap games like he used to. But one of our things that we do, I take him to the casino, and I've taken him to the racetracks. I've sort of accepted who he is and just enjoy those little moments with him. But he's still the same dude.
So you guys get to bond now over a little fun of betting.
Yeah,
I love
we
it.
watch.
I love the racetracks and the casino. So
Oh yeah. Well, he named this is not in the book, but he named one of my sisters after a racehorse.
okay.
Yeah, Wajima. It was a horse that won, and I have a half Cuban sister named Wajima.
Okay. It really goes deep, huh?
Oh no, he was committed.
You said Eddie was the firstborn, correct? He's
Mhm.
your older brother.
Mhm.
Shortly you guys moved back to Salinas, Puerto Rico for a fresh start.
Mm-hmm.
It didn't last too long. Your father decided to move back to Jersey City, and your brother Eddie started acting out, skipping school, getting into fights. This was a pivotal moment for all the struggles, which led you guys to move back to Jersey City.
Yeah.
At this point, you were still a baby. Your mother was alone on the island trying to navigate life as a single mother. And why did your father leave you guys alone on the island?
Based on his words, he goes, "Well, yo estaba loco." That's he's like he just couldn't stay still. He was a man of action, and he was always seeking it. You know, there's a moment in the book where this was the words out of his own mouth. Like I got a lot of these stories from my dad. He wasn't around in my life in the beginning, but as I got older and I became a man and a father, I gave him a choice. I says, I can forget about all that stuff, but now you have this young man here. If you want to be a part of it, you want to join the club, hey, I'm all about it. Start this new relationship. Yeah. So that changed our relationship.
What do you feel was your turning point and why she decided to move back to Jersey City?
Well, the reason, there was 2 times. The second time, the last time, basically the finances. It was also her second relationship, wasn't doing well. My stepfather. That was a big part of the instability on the island. Not only you have these 3 kids now, a young daughter now, you had me, and then you had my brother Eddie, who was 7.5 years older than me, who was 7.5 years older than me. You'd like to have a partner to help you out, right?
Yeah.
And, like I said, she was starting her own business, a little hair salon in Salinas, Puerto Rico, with a little chair, cutting hair in El Barrio, and there weren't a lot of clients. And then the ones that were, couldn't really afford a lot of stuff. I remember her giving a lot of free haircuts. So, and then that, with the culmination of, her divorcing my dad, and then my being away from Richard all the time, I think it's almost like she was hanging on to something that she couldn't hold on to.
Got it.
You know what I mean? Like she wanted Puerto Rico to be her home, but just things weren't meant to be. Whether it was her relationships, whether it was my brother, acting out, or having her son, 4,000 miles away on the other side.
Right.
So I'm sure all of those things weren't helping in the decision, but yeah.
The timeline now is the 1980s. Jersey City's becoming a melting pot. I love how you speak on the details of your days. The bodega is constantly filled with all the kids from the neighborhood. adults hanging on the building stoops, playing Scully on the streets, the adults opening the fire hydrants in the summer. Can you describe what these days meant to you and what Jersey City's melting pot looked like?
Oh man, I mean, it looked like the Puerto Rican Day Parade in every block. You know what I
Okay.
mean? It was, you know, because there was a big migration. You know, a lot of the established people that were in Jersey City, you know, they got their houses and they left. And then, you know, in the 70s, there was a big downturn financially. So we were there. And it was great. It just, you know, I was 4 or 5 years old at the time, and I just remember just playing, you know, seeing playing handball, having the wiffle ball, pretending to be Reggie Jackson. You know, when it did get hot, you know, the big boys would open the fire hydrant. You see the big old monkey wrench. I mean, it felt like a community, you know. It just felt like it was like that's how it was supposed to be, you know, when you're a kid, you know. So it was great. It was
And
great.
you guys were outside compared to the generation now, you know.
Yeah, we were playing outside all the time.
It was Scully for me because I played it as a kid. So
Boo.
exactly. Get the
Just
good
sanding
clay.
them down,
Yeah.
you know, filing them down, looking like a little flying saucer, man. Those
Yeah.
were it was great, you know, and those are the details that I really like. I love about the book that I want to share, you know, because
Yeah.
those are the things that are not around so much anymore, you know. Kids aren't playing in the streets no more.
No, they're home stuck on their tablet.
Yeah, yeah.
Your mother, Nena, had a love for salsa music,
Hmm.
dancing and performing. She acted as your first talent manager. Her favorite holiday was Halloween, and she created your costumes. Can you describe those moments and when she was excited to dress you up?
I was like, I guess I was the perfect little model because I would just let her do whatever she wanted to me, right? Maybe this is why I've been able to succeed in my career because they just tell me, Adrian, just sit there, and they just dress you up and they put stuff on you, and I would just sit there, and she's like, smile like this, and then I just remember how cold the makeup was when she would put it on me, and she was so detailed. Like she had the little Dracula mullet she would put on me, and it was like the makeup was like to the T, and I just it's those are the moments that I hang on to because it's like that I just never forget, and the fact that I won those competitions, I guess, is why I remember those things so much because it was this big prize, and I would be put in front of these people with this basket. So it's like it's almost like she gave me my first sense of like success or something, you know.
She probably gave you that light that you needed that to continue as an actor later on in life. You know, that's amazing. I remember you said that when you won your first competition, the basket wasn't for kids.
No, it was full of wine and stuff. But you know, I guess my mom had some pull.
Yeah, she was like, you know, hey. But hey, she did the work, so she deserved the basket.
Hey, you know what? It's all good. I think there was some nuts in there I got her, or some candy, but not much.
So did you guys go out trick-or-treating a lot for Halloween just as a family?
You
or
know,
no?
no, I don't remember trick-or-treating a lot. It was always at social clubs. You know, the Puerto Ricans, you know, we sort of just hung out in spots. So it was always at a part. It was always at the club, and everybody was there.
Had
you
a
know.
little party.
I remember trick-or-treating as I got older. You know, like 8, 9, you know, we did it on our own as kids, you know, not necessarily with my mom.
Okay. Let's fast forward to 1982. Your mother was struggling to keep up with life. She moved you guys back to Puerto Rico. She met your stepfather, Luis. You also got to spend a lot of time with your grandmother, Coca, and Uncle Santos, and your aunts. Navigating life in a new school, handling bullies, Uncle Santos being a big influence on you. How did that time in Puerto Rico make you feel?
I mean, that was like, to me, that was my golden years. For me, everything was normal. It was beautiful. You know, I had, you know, being, you know, first grade in Puerto Rico. I mean, I just mangoes, and I had quenepas, and I had the little, you know, a rio that ran across my grandmother's, you know, front courtyard, and, you know, and my grandmother was all love, you know, and then my aunts and uncles reciprocated that love. So I felt very loved in Puerto Rico, you know, like, and that's why I have this affinity for my island, because all I ever had was love in the beginning, you know, and all I remember is how beautiful it was, and how much my mom loved it there, and how my uncle loved to just bring me around everywhere in El Barrio, and I was just like the little kid with him next to this 6'2" guy, you know, he looked like a lamppost because he was skinny, but no, those were my most cherished times in Puerto Rico. It was nothing but love for me, nothing but love.
You also speak on celebrating Christmas in Puerto Rico.
Parrandas.
I guess there you go. Louis and Nana had a child together. Your little sister came along. Can you describe those days during the holidays, celebrating Christmas and?
Yeah, going back, my mom was very festive. She loved a party, and she loved to like the idea of a party. Like I remember some of the photos we have for New Year's, where she had glitter and would have top hats, So it was always all out for parties with my mom. And it was beautiful. My little sister was, she was my little doll. She was 4 years younger than me, and she was like, I was like the perfect age to be her big brother. And my stepdad was great. He was a great stepdad, and he loved my sister, and it was great. It was great until,
Right.
until things changed.
I- I remember when you said that your grandmother made you prepare your first pig.
Mm-hmm. She
She
tried.
put you. She tried. She put you up to the test. It didn't go so well.
No, it didn't
To
go
let
too
you on.
well, I think she was a little rambunctious trying to put a butcher knife on the 6-year-old, right? Like, yeah, stab him right here, Juching. But no, she was she lived off the land, And I remember playing with the pig pens and stuff. But yeah, she tried and she put this knife on me, and I just chickened out. I dropped the knife. I ran away. I was like, no, Grandma, you know what? I said, eso, que me ese cuchillo. And bang, and she went right into that and just. But, she still loved me the same.
I'm sure, because you said, no matter what, she still loved you the same.
Yeah.
She was just trying to put the little Puerto Rican culture in you, the little
sh-
spice.
Yeah.
The round two is when you guys moved back to Jersey City for the second time. Your mom had a big challenge handling Eddie's behavior. Your home was robbed, and you guys were in an ideal living situation.
Mm-hmm.
Louis and your mom's relationship fell apart. Things got physical between them. You spent your summers in Puerto Rico with your grandmother, Coca. When you came back and realized the hardships your mother was facing, all this triggers you to act out over the wants and needs of, food and clothes. You start robbing car radios with little friends. Basically, you guys go into survival mode. Your landlord puts a padlock on your apartment. You guys start sneaking in through the back door. How did these days define you and your family?
Well, it ultimately was the big definition of where the home officially broke.
Yeah.
That's her broken home.
Yeah.
Like that's it. That's where it broke. Unfortunately, there were a lot of substance abuse going on. My brother's substance abuse wasn't helping. My mother liked to drink too.
Mm-hmm.
And that was I touch on it too. It wasn't like she would, all of these things must have just been making her where, and I can relate, where sometimes you just seek solace,
Yeah.
right?
Mm-hmm.
And that started affecting my stepfather and my mom's relationship on top of my brother's issues. And it was just like a time bomb ready to explode. And I was just an observer there. I couldn't do anything about it. It's like almost like I could see, it's like I had the ability to know what was happening and I couldn't do nothing about it.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So it was very tragic,
But I also
unfortunately.
remember you saying you felt good when you were able to get your mom and your brother back into the apartment. So
Yeah,
it
yeah.
was big for a young kid.
Yeah, it was because of, my last summer in Puerto Rico, grandma, they talked, obviously they were talking, and
Yeah.
grandma knew things weren't right back in Jersey. And she's like, okay, you need to stay with me. I'll take care of you, right? And I was like, as much as I love you, I'm like, I got to go back because I'm the only guy she's got.
Yeah.
So, I mean, yeah, I felt like if I wasn't there, I wouldn't know, imagine, what would have happened. So I felt like I had made the right decision.
Yeah. You were also heartbroken because you didn't want to leave your grandmother in Puerto Rico.
No, it was tough.
Yeah.
It was tough. It's like, when you're 9, 10 years old, you don't know what decisions you're making for life. I was like 10 years old making that decision. It's like that what should have happened is that you're staying here with me.
Right.
Right?
Not give you the decision.
They
as
gave
a
me the
9, 10.
choice,
Yeah.
And who doesn't want to be around their mom?
Right.
I don't know. I just needed to be around my mom.
Yeah. You were about 10 years old when you met your biological father in front of Salcedo Social Club, which was your mom's favorite place to be and work part-time.
Mm-hmm.
In that moment, all your dreams of who your father was came true. Can you imagine this day ever coming true? Walk me through those moments.
when I first met him.
Yep.
Yeah, I mean, it was larger than life. It was like I kept hearing about him all my life, you know. And yeah, maybe he was around when I was 6 months old, but I don't remember him, you know. But it was everything that I thought. You know, he was this tall, lanky guy, very loud, you know, always spoke Spanish, you know. And it was just strange because I had never seen my parents standing next to each other before. So I just sort of took it in. I just remember being nervous, you know, bien tímido, but also excited that, okay, here he is. This is real. Like, he exists, you know. But that was the beginning of, once I knew and I saw him and I sort of got, like, okay, now I know who you are, so I'm going to go find you.
Yeah.
And that's what started my quest.
Yeah, and your relationship with him.
Yeah.
At this point, you've been introduced to your biological father's, at that point, his wife and another baby sister. You started to meet people your dad hung out with as well. I remember you saying you went into the Sawan bar to ask your dad for money. This is the first time he acknowledged you as his son. It must have felt good to finally be acknowledged, help, and have some type of connection with your biological father.
Yeah.
How was those days?
Oh, I mean, it was bittersweet.
Yeah.
Because it was, you know, obviously I'm excited. Oh my God, I have a resource, my father, you know, who I didn't think I had, you know, for some reason or another. I don't know, you know, we can get into my mom, why she didn't pursue him so much. But it's like, okay, well, now that I know he's here, I felt relieved because it was tough. My mom was struggling, you know, there was a lot of starvation, to be honest with you.
Yeah.
And it was like, okay, well, now I have him, and I know if I need him, I can go get some money and get some food. And at the same time, I was pissed at him. I hated the fact that I had to go there and do that, you know, because it was like, why won't you just come why weren't you looking for me, making sure that I had? Why do I have to come look for you?
Right.
For you to make sure that I have food or what I need. So it was conflicting. It was very conflicting, especially when I was younger.
Wow.
Yeah.
You say in those days, around the same time that your mom's drinking picked up, and you notice how most of the time she spent her days at the social club. How did that affect you growing up as a 10, 11-year-old? What type of changes did your mother go through, and how did it start to affect your family?
Well, it just started. It affected her second relationship. You know, they never got married, but her second marriage with my stepfather. I mean, because he was having his own little struggles too.
Yeah.
And maybe there was some jealousy involved. You know, there's some things when you're a kid and you're 10, 11 years old, these adults aren't telling you all the details. But as you get older and you're realizing, well, why is my wife hanging out at the bar? Why is my wife at the social club? Why is she still there with my daughter?
Yeah.
You know, you start putting things together, right? So later in life, I put together, okay, this is why they were having a hard time. And then as we get along, not to give a big part of the book, but there was a reason why my mom was deteriorating. You know what I mean? And then that was part of, you know, when she, you know, because eventually she gets sick.
Right.
So that was towards those years, but you could just see where it was something different. There was a change happening in her.
And it was slowly just changing.
It was like
day
she was
by day.
giving up.
Got it.
Yeah.
We'll get to that part, but I can understand and see how that's maybe the start of her life changing.
Yeah, nothing was working. You know, the son, my brother, my relationships. It's almost like, what do you do? You know.
Yeah. Unfortunately, pick up bad habits
Yeah,
to numb the pain and just get through your day. So,
yeah.
Tony's Pizza Shop. This was the first legit job, even though you weren't old enough to legally work.
Yeah.
Can you take me through those moments of how you started all the way to the point where you were able to finally come to the front and work the counter? How did Tony and his family embrace you, and what was the pizza wars about?
Well, you know, I mean, Tony Conti and his family, you know, I mean, I changed their name. That's, you know, it's a fictional name, but he's still around.
Okay.
Yeah. They were great. It was a blessing. Because, I mean, I was hungry. I was very courageous. Well, when I went in there and I heard him talking, he said I'm an artist. I can draw this sign for you, and that's how our relationship started.
Right.
And he was so impressed by the fact that I asked him that, hey, I can do this. I'm a hustler. So that's how our relationship started. And then his sisters, his mom, they just adopted me. They kind of saw my situation. They knew the neighborhood. There were a lot of kids like me.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And then they must have taken a liking to me because they knew that I was fighting against everything else that was happening. A lot of my friends were hanging out in the corner. Some of my friends were already selling weed, at 11 and 10 years old. Trying to tell me if I needed to, yo, I can hook you up. You know what I mean? So they saw the struggles, obviously with my family life and then the street, and they were like, okay, I think we can help this kid. And I showed up every day.
Wow. Yeah.
That helped. I'm like, all right, I'm here. They couldn't get rid of me.
Even if they wanted to, they couldn't.
I'm like, that pizza kept me there. I was like, this pizza smells good. I ain't going nowhere.
And you stated that there were 2 pizza shops side to side. So that's where the wars came about, where...
The Pizza Wars. Yeah, it was very chronicled in downtown Jersey City. You had the old school pizzeria, who the gentleman rented it out. Eventually didn't want to rent it out to Tony. And then Tony opened up. He hit the old guy, Patsy, ended up closing it. So then Tony says, well, I'm going to open up my own place right here next door.
Yeah, I heard, they shared the same address.
Yeah, one was 415 Mama Street, and the other one was 415 and a half Mama Street.
Oh, it's very...
So they literally right next door. So it divided the neighborhood. There was a lot of press at the time. We had the Jersey Journal, the Hudson Reporter. So yeah, it was a legit pizza war, and that's what it was called, the Pizza War.
Wow. And then eventually you get old enough where he can actually put you at the front working the counter now. And I heard that you made sure you were great at everything. Oh,
I did it. Yeah, I was to do it all. I mean, I started out cleaning the pizzeria. I would come in every day at 9 o'clock and clean it till about 11. Just mopping, cleaning, and then grew to doing stocking. Preparing the prep work. Making the dough, cutting the cheese, making the sauces, and having, the Italian sisters and moms teaching me how to peel shrimp and, flatten, veal parmesan and stuff like that. So once I saw the opportunity, I knew there was my way out, because I was like, I found my food source, because that was a huge thing in my, you hear it now, it's called food insecurity. That's kind of the word they use nowadays. That's what we had. That's what was happening, and I knew it. And once I found the pizzeria, I was like, okay, now I know I'm never going to go hungry ever again.
Yeah.
Because all I got to do is work.
You were able to finally help your family and bring pizza and food home at a very young age. Mm-hmm. Your mom wouldn't take your money, but you were fully aware that your family needed help. This was a big responsibility at such a young age. How did it feel to be able to feed your family?
Oh, it felt great. Bringing food home it felt great. I knew it was life-changing, even for my brother, Eddie, who was just, doing this thing, and then once in a while he'd come in here and I'd throw him a slice. Yeah. You know what I mean? Yeah. It was life-changing. It was life-changing for me. It made me an independent young man. From that point on, there's one of my chapters is called "The Dollar in Your Pocket," right? Mm-hmm. And from that point on, Tony and his family, instilled the lesson of how to earn that dollar and always have a dollar in your pocket. And it was life-changing. It was great.
It was the 1980s. There was a war on drugs. Teen pregnancy was sky high. You realized at an early age that you need to break the family cycle because how you were living was generational. Mm-hmm. You didn't want to continue that pattern. I know Tony was a positive influence on your life. What values did he instill on you?
He grew up Catholic. So he was very devout Catholic. Mm-hmm. So he was very always God and praying. So I think that, that had an influence. Although, it's very, really when you talk about religion, it's a tricky thing. But I think the heart where it came from was good. They always meant well. You know what I mean? And they were people who lived by their actions, but he just seeing them, the way they invited me to their home, I started spending Christmases and Thanksgivings with them, and seeing how they were as a family,
Yeah.
having the 7 fishes, and things like that. And just the way they, no matter how much they yelled at each other, they were always together, like that, they were family. As opposed to when I compared it to mine, every time we fought, everybody was, well, I'm leaving.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, yo voy pa'l carajo. Or they'll send you pa'l carajo. And then they stay in el carajo. And nobody really is like fighting for that nucleus. And that's one of the lessons I got the most from
His
my
family.
Italian family, yeah.
Yeah. And I know that you stated he was a really good influence on you, like kept you off the street, made sure you were good, made sure
Yeah.
there was money in your pocket. He was like, the older brother for you. So to give you a job at a young age is amazing, even though he had to hide you sometimes.
Yeah, I mean, I wasn't.
Yeah.
It was typical. You saw
Yeah.
kids hustling, you
Yeah.
know what I mean? But yeah, it's like, okay, I couldn't be in the counter. I wait till a certain time, and then I go clean in the back because it took me an hour to do dishes, and nobody would see you do dishes.
Yeah.
A lot of it was dishes. It was like, all right.
So there's a heartbreaking moment around this time where your mom was diagnosed with stomach cancer.
Mm-hmm.
Your mom was in and out of the hospital until the point where she was admitted long-term to the hospital because of her health was declining. I know you stated that Tony's family helped your mom get into a better hospital due to a family member working where she was currently admitted. At that moment in your life, you were still very young. How did you process the news and continue to work, go to school, visiting her in the hospital and seeing her health decline right in front of your eyes?
Mm. Well, I'm not gonna lie. It was the hardest part of my life.
Right. I'm sure.
Because I started feeling good, right? I started I had money. I started buying her presents.
Yeah.
I was finally getting us out of this funk, you know what I mean? And I started having plans, and then you get this news, right? And then it's like a rug just gets swept from under you. But it was devastating. It was devastating because I was a mama's boy. I love my mom.
Yeah.
So it was the hardest thing I ever had to go through.
You say in the book, October 5th is the day where your mother passed and she was finally free of her pain. There's a specific line that you wrote that captured the moment. And if I may, it was the moment where she took her last breath and you grabbed her hand. At that moment, it went silent. And even though your family was around, for that moment, it was just the two of you. Can you tell me about that moment?
Yeah, I started feeling very connected towards once you come to terms,
Mm-hmm.
you can go two ways, right? You can follow that anger and bitterness, and in that moment, I just understood that, okay, it's up to me. And it felt good that it was up to me now. You know what I mean? Okay, even though it was going to be hard, that I'm going to be on my own, but I was making my own decisions now. And then having that moment where I speak to her, one of the things is like, when people are passing, one of the last things that you lose is your ability to hear. And when I knew that she heard me, I felt good. It felt like, okay,
Yeah.
you can go and I can go do my thing.
At the same time, there were some horrible rumors that were running around the neighborhood about you and Tony. Only to define the moment where you guys handled it on the streets. At this point, you handled your business. It must have been hard to handle all that, plus the recent passing of your entire world, your mother. How do you feel it affected you?
Yeah. At the time, it was very frustrating. Basically, I didn't understand why this stuff was happening.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It was very confusing. So besides the confusion, then you get the anger, right? But, excuse me, one of the lessons the Contis, the main lessons they taught me was patience and to control my anger, right? Because, hey, I was a hot kid. There was a lot of stuff to be angry about when I was younger. And they would just, no matter how angry I would come home from school, Gino, you got a good head on your shoulder.
Yeah.
They're on the corner. They're not going anywhere. And it was always them just saying, hey, you're bigger than this. Don't worry. God love, like your mom's, it was always encouraging me to not act out, right? Even though we were being wrong. But it was those, not just him, his sister, his mom, they were very peaceful. They it was almost like, turn the other cheek, and they kept, it was because of that.
Yeah, they kept you grounded.
It kept me grounded. It kept me grounded because I was ready to explode.
I'm sure.
I was ready to explode, but they kept me grounded.
Um, I'm going to end deep diving into the book by saying, when you guys took her to her final resting place in Puerto Rico, before that you had a service for her in Jersey City. You said it was flooded with friends, families, and
Hmm.
strangers you never met.
Hmm.
How big was it?
Yeah. Well, it was a lot of the, I mean, it was all the people from the social club, right? Because
Mhm.
it was like, my grandmother didn't. My mom honestly didn't want it there, but that's a whole nother story.
Yeah.
My grandparents, they twist the arm and they gave in. But it was okay when I think back on it because it was it was the people she loved being around. It was all a lot of softball teams. Los Salceros. There was all this this community of Puerto Ricans in downtown Jersey City. So, and it was beautiful. It was it was a lot of family and a lot of those friends. And hey, it at the end of the day, it was nice to see how many people she touched,
Yeah.
how many
She
people
touched a
loved
lot of
her,
lives.
how many hairs she cut. But it was nice. It's bittersweet, but it's nice to see people care for your mom.
And then after that, surely you guys took her home to her final resting place, which
Hmm.
is in the beautiful island of Puerto Rico. So I love that she was laid to rest where she always
Hmm.
tried her best to stay at and move to and make a life there. So that was beautiful. Um, the last thing I want to quote out of your book is you say, "All could be gone in an instant. Nothing is guaranteed." Do you believe? Did that quote come out of that moment, or do you feel like that's just how life has always been?
It's one of it's one of the first things I wrote, right?
Mm.
Because when I started writing, uh, it was about understanding what was happening and where I was. And I had some good mentors in high school. Once I started, getting into my acting, I had some great teachers uh, who clung to me, and gave me books. But that was one of the first things that I wrote, where it's like, okay, well, the worst thing that happened to me already happened,
Yeah.
right? And then I understood. It's like, well, I felt like I had a clean slate, you know. What else could happen to me besides, obviously, losing my own life? But at that point, but it was life changing. Made me. It's when I became a man.
All right.
Yeah.
So tell me about yourself now. Up to date.
Well, up to date, we're still, we're still flipping the script.
Yes.
I'm very happy. I have a beautiful wife. I've been married, happily married, luckily married, for 19 years.
Wow.
And I have two beautiful kids. I have a son and my daughter, and that's why I wrote this book, so they can get to know their history, not read history, but read our history
Yeah.
and our story.
Yeah.
But yeah, and we're still, now we're enjoying, the success of the book and all. I think all the lives that we're changing with the book, which is the goal. And my career's still going. Got some films coming out in the next couple of years.
Okay.
I think one's coming out either at the end of this year or next year. So look out, stay tuned for some projects coming out, and we'll always be in the mix in Hollywood.
Amazing. I love that. Let them know where they can find you, where they can buy your book, because you need to buy this book. You need to read it.
Yeah. Visit my website at adrianalvarado.net. You can follow me on Instagram at real_Adrian_Alvarado. You can get the book through my website, or you can go to Amazon and pick it up. And it's available. If you want a signed copy, you can order it right through my website, and I'll send you a signed copy right through there. And it's available on Kindle and ebooks.
Amazing. I want to thank you again thank you so much for
Oh.
getting on Orange Cuts Podcast. Like, subscribe, comment. If you have any questions, he'll be reading.